Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. Shadows of the Sky. Amira James, a visionary entrepreneur and the dynamic CEO of Skyglide Airlines, gazed out from her office window on the 30th floor of Skyglide's corporate headquarters. The endless sky stretched out before her, and just below, the company's fleet of planes gleamed under the morning sunlight. Each one was a symbol of her life's work, a testament to her journey from humble beginnings to leading one of the country's most successful airlines. Yet, today, the pride she usually felt was absent, replaced by a gnawing unease. The reports had started trickling in months ago. At first, they seemed like minor complaints, passengers unhappy with service delays, an offhand comment from the crew, or inattentive behavior. But as weeks turned into months, the complaints became more frequent and troubling. Reports of outright rudeness, discrimination, and a growing sense that Skyglide's once premium service was deteriorating weighed heavily on Amira's shoulders. This wasn't just about poor service, it was an affront to the very values she had built the airline on: respect, dignity, and inclusivity. Skyglide Airlines wasn't just another business to Amira. It was her legacy, her lifeblood. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she had spent her childhood watching planes soar overhead, dreaming of the freedom and opportunity they represented. It had been her mother, a resilient woman who had raised Amira single-handedly, who inspired her to dream big. Amira, her mother had often said, "Your wings aren't made for staying on the ground. Fly higher than the clouds, and don't ever let anyone clip them." Those words fueled her through years of study, countless late nights building her business plan, and the relentless fight to establish Skyglide Airlines in a cutthroat industry. Amira had always believed that her airline wasn't just about getting people from point A to point B. It was about connecting people, cultures, and dreams. But now, staring at the emails from her customer relations team, she felt a pang of disappointment. Had she lost touch with the very foundation of her company? Was the culture she had worked so hard to instill eroding under her watch? Amira's thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of her office phone. It was her assistant, Nadia. "Amira, the board meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m., but I wanted to let you know we've received another batch of feedback. Some of it isn't good." Amira took a deep breath. "Forward it to me, Nadia. And thank you." The next hour was spent reading through the feedback. One email stood out. It was from a passenger named Clara Davidson, a retired teacher. Clara described an incident in which she was ignored by a flight attendant after politely asking for assistance with her carry-on. The attendant, Clara claimed, had openly rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. Clara ended her email with a poignant line, "I've always loved flying with Skyglide, but if this is the way your airline treats passengers now, I'll take my business elsewhere." That was the breaking point for Amira. She couldn't sit idly by while her company's reputation and core values were tarnished. Action was necessary, but she needed to understand the problem at its root. By the time the board meeting started, Amira had made a decision, one she hadn't shared with anyone yet. The executives around the table presented their usual metrics, charts, and strategies to address the feedback. But none of them seemed to grasp the depth of the issue. They talked about operational efficiency, streamlining processes, and better training modules, but Amira knew this wasn't a problem that could be solved from behind a desk. When the meeting ended, she addressed the team with calm determination. "I appreciate your efforts," she began, her voice steady yet firm. "But I don't believe we can fix this problem by looking at numbers on a spreadsheet. This is about culture, about how every passenger feels when they step onto our planes. And to understand that, I need to experience it myself." Her team exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean?" one of the executives asked hesitantly. "I'm going undercover," Amira announced. "I'll board one of our flights as a regular passenger, without any of the privileges or recognition that come with being the CEO. I need to see, hear, and feel what our customers experience. Only then can we fix what's broken." Her announcement was met with a mix of surprise and concern. Nadia, who had entered the room to deliver some documents, looked at Amira with wide eyes. Are you sure about this? Nadia asked quietly after the meeting. I've never been more sure, Amira replied. This isn't just about fixing a few bad apples in the crew. It's about rebuilding trust and ensuring that our passengers know they matter. If I don't do this, I'm failing them and myself. The following week, Amira prepared for her journey. She dressed in simple, understated clothing, dark jeans, a plain blouse, and a jacket that hid her typically commanding presence. Her hair was pulled back into a casual ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. She carried a modest suitcase, a stark contrast to the designer luggage she usually traveled with. At the airport, Amira approached the Skyglide counter. The staff member behind the desk greeted her with a professional but slightly cold demeanor. There was no recognition in their eyes, and for the first time in years, Amira felt invisible. It was an oddly liberating yet humbling experience. As she made her way through security, she noticed the subtle glances from TSA agents, the kind that seemed to question whether she truly belonged in the priority line. She had chosen to book an economy ticket, but her frequent flyer status still afforded her some perks. She declined them all, insisting on experiencing every step of the journey as a standard passenger. The boarding area was crowded, with passengers chatting, checking their phones, or anxiously watching the clock. Amira found a seat near the corner, observing the interactions around her. She noticed a young mother struggling with her toddler, ignored by the gate agents who seemed more focused on their conversations than the passengers. When boarding was announced, Amira joined the line, blending in seamlessly. As she stepped onto the plane, she felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. The flight attendants greeted passengers with practiced smiles, but when Amira reached her row, something unexpected happened. "Ma'am," said one of the attendants, a tall woman named Lana, her smile fading as her eyes swept over Amira. "Is this your seat?" Amira nodded, showing her ticket. Lana's expression hardened, and she gestured brusquely toward the overhead bin. "Well, make sure your bag fits properly. We can't have passengers holding up the line." The comment stung more than Amira expected. She wasn't used to being treated this way, but she quickly realized this might be how some of her passengers felt every day. Settling into her seat, she took a deep breath. The flight had just begun, and already, Amira's journey was proving to be more revealing than she had anticipated. A flight to remember. Amara settled into her seat, determined to observe everything with an open mind, even as her stomach churned with unease. She watched Sophia, the flight attendant, shift from a cheerful and accommodating demeanor with other passengers to a curt and indifferent attitude whenever she approached. Amara knew she wasn't being treated with the respect she expected her staff to offer. However, she maintained her composure, taking mental notes of every detail. As the plane began to fill up, Amara observed a young mother struggling with a baby and a diaper bag in the aisle. Instead of stepping in to help, Sophia stood a few feet away, arms crossed, as if waiting for the woman to figure it out on her own. Amara's heart sank. This wasn't the Skyflyer standard she had worked so hard to build. She took a deep breath, reminded herself of her purpose, and continued to watch. The plane took off smoothly, but the mood in the economy cabin was far from pleasant. The flight crew's demeanor wavered between detached and outright rude. When the beverage cart reached Amara's row, she witnessed another sharp contrast. The passenger beside her, a well-dressed man in a business suit, was greeted with an enthusiastic, "Good afternoon, sir. What can I get for you today?" Amara received a very different reception. "Coffee," she requested politely when Sophia turned to her. Sophia rolled her eyes. "We don't have decaf in economy," she said briskly, though Amara hadn't specified any such preference. The flight attendant's tone was dismissive, her body language hostile. "That's fine," Amara replied calmly, trying not to let the sting of humiliation show. "Regular coffee will do." Sophia returned with the coffee, but instead of handing it over gently, she set the cup down on the tray with such force that some of it sloshed onto the tray table. "Here," she said curtly, before moving on without another word. Amara stared at the spilled coffee, her emotions a whirlwind of disappointment and determination. This wasn't just about her, It was about every passenger who had ever been made to feel small, insignificant, or unworthy. She resolved to address this deeply ingrained culture as soon as she returned to headquarters. However, the flight took a dramatic turn that Amara hadn't anticipated. A commotion erupted a few rows ahead when a passenger complained loudly about being ignored by the crew. The man, an elderly gentleman, had been asking for water for nearly 20 minutes, only to be repeatedly brushed off by Sophia. Frustrated, he raised his voice, attracting the attention of other passengers. Sophia returned to the man's seat, her expression filled with irritation. "Sir, there's no need to shout," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We're doing our best to accommodate everyone." The man's face turned red with anger. "Your best? I've been asking for water for ages. Is this how Skyflyer treats its customers?" Amara watched the exchange intently, her heart aching for the elderly passenger. She felt an overwhelming urge to intervene but decided against it for now. Her goal was to remain an observer, though it was becoming increasingly difficult to stay silent. As the flight continued, more instances of poor service unfolded. A young couple was scolded for asking for an extra blanket for their baby. A woman with mobility issues was left to struggle on her own to the lavatory. The passengers were growing restless, their dissatisfaction palpable. Amara could see the cracks in her company's reputation widening right before her eyes. When the flight attendants began the in-flight meal service, Amara braced herself for another round of indignities. Her suspicions were confirmed when Sophia approached with a tray of prepackaged meals. "Chicken or vegetarian?" Sophia asked the man beside Amara with a smile. "Chicken, please," he replied. Sophia handed him the meal, her demeanor warm and professional. When it was Amara's turn, the tone shifted once again. "Chicken or vegetarian?" Sophia asked flatly, barely looking at her. "Chicken," Amara said, her voice calm but firm. Sophia handed over the meal without a word, the tray clattering onto the table. This time, the chicken entree was cold, with condensation pooling on the lid. Amara glanced at the tray, then back at Sophia, who was already walking away. It was a small indignity in the grand scheme of things, but it encapsulated the larger issue. Passengers weren't being treated as valued customers but as inconveniences to be endured. As the flight neared its destination, Amara felt a growing sense of urgency. She had seen enough to confirm that changes needed to happen, immediately. But the final blow came just as the plane began its descent. Sophia returned to the economy cabin to collect trash. When she reached Amara's row, she leaned in close and whispered, "You should really consider flying with a different airline next time." The words stung, not just because they were unprofessional, but because they betrayed the very principles Amara had built Skyflyer on. It was clear that Sophia had no idea who she was speaking to. Amara didn't respond. Instead, she sat quietly, her mind racing with plans for how she would address the issues she had witnessed. By the time the plane touched down, she had already formulated a strategy for overhauling the company's service culture. As passengers began disembarking, Amara took one last look around the cabin, committing every detail to memory. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was more determined than ever to ensure that Skyflyer lived up to its name as an airline that treated every passenger with dignity and respect. Little did Sophia know, the woman she had dismissed and humiliated wasn't just another passenger. She was the CEO of the very airline she worked for, and Amara was about to make it her mission to ensure that no passenger ever experienced such treatment again, shattering the illusion. The descent had been smooth, but Amara's mind churned like a storm as she quietly exited the plane. She carried nothing more than her small bag and the mental weight of what she had witnessed. The casual indifference, the outright rudeness, and the subtle but painful discrimination lingered in her thoughts like scars on glass. For an airline that she had painstakingly built with integrity and passion, this experience was nothing short of heartbreaking. As Amara entered the airport terminal, the buzz of passengers filled the space, yet she felt oddly detached from the crowd. For a brief moment, she had been one of them, another ordinary traveler, invisible and powerless. She sat in a corner near the baggage claim area, her hands curled around her phone as she typed notes. Detailed accounts of everything she had observed. She knew this wasn't just a matter of training or attitude, it was deeper. The erosion of respect and empathy among her employees had shaken the foundation of Skyflyer's core values. After several minutes of gathering her thoughts, Amara summoned a car to take her back to her headquarters. This would be the beginning of a transformation, but first, she needed to regroup. The quiet return. The following morning, Amara arrived at the towering Skyflyer Airlines headquarters earlier than usual. The sprawling glass building gleamed in the sunlight as employees filtered through the doors, oblivious to the monumental day ahead. Dressed in her usual professional attire, a tailored navy suit that spoke volumes about her authority, Amara carried herself with quiet focus. As she entered the elevator, a young flight attendant who had just finished a long-haul shift rushed in after her. The attendant, breathless and oblivious to who Amara was, sighed heavily and muttered, "I don't know how long I can deal with this nonsense. Passengers are such a headache." Amara turned her head slightly, her brow furrowing. She didn't say a word, but her silence carried weight. The young attendant glanced at her, sensing something unusual, before shrinking into the corner. When the elevator doors opened, Amara walked briskly to her office. Her executive assistant, Jordan, greeted her warmly. "Good morning, ma'am. Did you have a good weekend?" Amara nodded. "I had a very enlightening experience. I need an immediate meeting with all department heads." "No delays, Jordan." Jordan's smile faltered at her serious tone. "Of course. I'll have everyone in the conference room within the hour." As Jordan left, Amara sat at her desk, staring out the window. The skyline seemed peaceful, but within her heart, a fire burned fiercely. Today, she would address not only what she had witnessed, but also the root of the problems that had plagued her company. The reckoning begins. An hour later, the company's senior executives and department heads sat in the grand conference room. The glass walls allowed sunlight to flood the space, casting long shadows over the serious faces seated around the table. There was an air of curiosity and tension. Something big was coming, they could all feel it. Amara entered the room, her footsteps sharp and deliberate. She placed a thick folder onto the table, her eyes scanning each person seated before her. These were the leaders of Skyflyer Airlines, the people she had entrusted to uphold the company's standards. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm yet commanding. "Before we discuss anything else today, I need to share a personal experience." The room fell silent. 2 days ago, I boarded Flight 437 as a regular passenger. No special treatment. No entourage. None of you knew, nor did the crew. I wanted to see, firsthand, what our passengers experience when they fly with us. A murmur spread through the room, accompanied by uneasy glances. Amara raised her hand for silence. What I saw and experienced was unacceptable. Our customers, people who trust us to provide them with care and professionalism, are being treated like burdens. Disrespectful attitudes, dismissive behavior, and outright discrimination were on full display. A flight attendant rolled her eyes at passengers, ignored the elderly, scolded a young couple for asking for a blanket, and even had the audacity to suggest I choose another airline next time. Gasps rippled across the table. Some executives exchanged stunned looks. Others avoided Amara's piercing gaze. "Let me remind you all," she continued, her voice rising slightly, "Skyflyer Airlines was built on the principles of respect, equality, and premium service for everyone. Not just first-class travelers, not just people who look or dress a certain way, everyone. What I saw on Flight 437 was not just disappointing. It was a betrayal of everything this company stands for." She paused, letting her words settle in. "We have clearly allowed a culture of arrogance and complacency to take root. That changes today." The overhaul. Amara spent the next hour outlining a bold and aggressive plan to overhaul the airline's service culture. She introduced a 5-point initiative that addressed training, accountability, and corporate values. Immediate re-education: every flight attendant and ground staff member would undergo mandatory retraining focused on empathy, professionalism, and diversity. The training would be hands-on, incorporating real-world scenarios. Undercover passenger program: Skyflyer executives, including Amara herself, would regularly travel as undercover passengers to monitor service quality. No one would know who they were, ensuring unbiased assessments. Customer feedback revamp: a new system would be implemented to collect and act on customer feedback swiftly. Passenger complaints would no longer be ignored or brushed off. Rewarding excellence: employees who consistently provided outstanding service would receive recognition, bonuses, and growth opportunities. Exceptional performance would become the benchmark, not the exception. Zero tolerance policy: discrimination, unprofessionalism, or neglect would no longer be tolerated. Immediate corrective action would be taken against employees who failed to uphold Skyflyer's values. Amara's voice remained steady as she concluded. "I'm not interested in excuses. I'm interested in results. Every leader in this room is responsible for implementing these changes within their departments. I will personally monitor the progress." The fallout. As the meeting ended, the executives filed out of the room in stunned silence. Amara remained behind, staring out the window once again. She felt no triumph, only resolve. Change wasn't easy, and she knew that resistance would come. But Skyflyer needed to remember its purpose: to serve people, not to dismiss them. In the weeks that followed, Amara's overhaul began taking effect. Training sessions rolled out across all departments, led by professionals Amara handpicked for their expertise. Employees grumbled at first, some complaining that the expectations were too high. But Amara refused to relent. Her undercover program also began in earnest. Senior executives and managers were dispatched on random flights as secret passengers, recording everything they observed. Some returned shocked at how poorly they themselves had been treated. Others shared moments of pride when they witnessed excellent service that reflected Skyflyer's true values. The story of the mysterious passenger on Flight 437 began to spread among employees like wildfire. It didn't take long for whispers to circulate that Amara herself had been the one sitting in economy that day. Flight attendants and ground staff grew wary. Standards improved, not out of fear, but because they realized how far they had drifted from their mission. Sophia, the flight attendant who had treated Amara so poorly, was called into HR. After multiple complaints about her conduct and a thorough review of her behavior, she was given a choice: undergo intensive retraining or resign. She chose to leave, though not without bitterness. Her departure sent a message: poor treatment of passengers would no longer be tolerated. The spark of change. Months later, Skyflyer's reputation began to rebound. Passenger satisfaction scores rose, and glowing reviews poured in. People praised the airline's renewed commitment to service and dignity. Amara watched from the sidelines, proud but still vigilant. One evening, Amara boarded another Skyflyer flight, this time anonymously yet again. She settled into her economy seat and waited, heart pounding slightly as she wondered what would happen this time. A flight attendant approached her row, smiling warmly. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome aboard Skyflyer Airlines. Can I get you a coffee or anything to make your flight more comfortable?" Amara smiled back. Change had begun. A test of resilience. The cabin hummed with the quiet murmur of passengers settling in, and the soft chime signaling takeoff sounded overhead. Amara's gaze lingered on the flight attendant who had just greeted her. Her warm smile and attentive demeanor starkly contrasted the hostility she had faced on Flight 437. It was an encouraging start, proof that the sweeping changes were beginning to take root. Amara leaned back in her seat and exhaled softly. This flight wasn't just about observing, it was about verifying that the culture of respect she was rebuilding had genuinely taken hold. Change was never instant, and she knew there would still be weak links to address. She braced herself for the possibility of encountering setbacks, but remained hopeful. The unfolding test. As the plane leveled off, the in-flight service began. Amara's eyes darted across the cabin, absorbing every detail: flight attendants assisting elderly passengers, ensuring families were comfortable, and maintaining polite, patient interactions with travelers. It was far better than her last experience. But just as she started to relax, a commotion broke out a few rows behind her. An agitated voice cut through the hum of the cabin. "This is unacceptable. How dare you speak to me that way?" Passengers turned their heads, straining to see what was happening. Amara glanced back and noticed a middle-aged man, sharply dressed in a designer suit, towering over a young flight attendant. The man's face was red with anger, and his voice boomed. "I'm in first class, and I demand to be treated as such. You've completely mishandled my drink order." Amara's brows furrowed. This situation would test whether the new training programs had genuinely prepared her staff to deal with difficult passengers. The flight attendant, a petite woman with a calm but slightly nervous expression, held her ground. Her badge read Tina. "Sir, I'm very sorry for the mix-up," Tina said respectfully. "Allow me to fix this for you right away." "Fix it? It's already ruined. I asked for sparkling water, not still water. How hard is it to get that right?" The man's voice grew louder, attracting even more attention. Tina didn't flinch, though Amara could see the tension in her shoulders. "I completely understand your frustration, sir," Tina said evenly. "I'll bring you the sparkling water immediately, along with a complimentary refreshment for the inconvenience. Let me make this right for you." Her calmness was remarkable, grace under fire. Even as the man continued to grumble, Tina turned away to retrieve the correct drink. When she returned moments later, her tone remained steady and respectful. "Here you go, sir. I've also brought you a small snack as a token of our apology. If there's anything else I can do to make your flight more comfortable, please don't hesitate to let me know." The man muttered something under his breath, but accepted the drink and the snack. Tina smiled politely and walked back toward the galley, her professional demeanor unshaken. The aftermath. Amara's heart swelled with pride. Tina's response embodied everything Skyflyer stood for: professionalism, empathy, and resilience. Handling difficult customers was one of the most challenging parts of the job, but Tina had managed it beautifully. Amara quietly jotted down a note to recognize Tina during her next company-wide address. Employees like her were the key to rebuilding Skyflyer's reputation. But as much as Tina's performance impressed her, Amara knew there were always lessons to be learned. The disgruntled man's treatment of the crew was another issue that deserved attention. How could Skyflyer better support its employees in dealing with hostile or entitled passengers? Her thoughts were interrupted as another flight attendant approached her row. "Excuse me, ma'am," the attendant said with a bright smile. "I just wanted to make sure everything is okay. Can I get you anything?" Amara looked up, genuinely taken aback by the attentiveness. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied softly. "But I appreciate you asking." The attendant nodded warmly and moved down the aisle to check on others. Amara couldn't help but notice the shift. The crew seemed more proactive, more intentional in their interactions. It wasn't perfect, there were still moments of hesitation, a few rough edges, but it was progress. Tangible progress. The next challenge. Hours later, as the flight approached its destination, Amara prepared herself for one last observation. She wanted to see how the crew handled disembarkation, a time when many airlines faltered as tired employees rushed passengers off the plane without a second thought. When the wheels touched the ground, the cabin erupted in applause, as often happened on smooth landings. Amara chuckled softly, appreciating the moment of shared relief among the passengers. As the doors opened and the disembarkation process began, Amara watched carefully. Tina and her colleagues positioned themselves strategically at the exits, bidding passengers farewell with smiles and gratitude. "Thank you for flying with us. Have a wonderful day." Tina's voice rang out cheerfully as she helped an elderly woman navigate the narrow aisle. "Safe travels," another attendant said, grinning warmly at a family with two energetic kids. It was a small gesture, but it left an impact. Passengers walked off the plane with smiles, their frustrations forgotten. Amara herself waited patiently until nearly everyone had exited. When it was her turn, Tina looked up and smiled. "Thank you for flying with us today," she said with genuine warmth. Amara paused, locking eyes with her. "Tina, is it?" she asked softly. "Yes, ma'am," Tina replied, surprised but polite. "You did a remarkable job today," Amara said, her voice carrying weight. "Keep up the excellent work." Tina blushed slightly, looking humbled. "Thank you so much. That means a lot." With a nod, Amara exited the aircraft. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, her heart felt lighter. Progress was happening, but she knew there was still more to do. A surprise meeting. The next morning, Amara sat in the company's boardroom, surrounded by her senior team. A new phase of her overhaul was about to begin, recognizing excellence and fostering a deeper culture of respect, not just toward passengers, but among employees themselves. "Before we begin," Amara said, "I'd like to share an experience from yesterday's flight." A flight attendant named Tina demonstrated remarkable professionalism under pressure. Her poise and commitment to customer satisfaction were exactly what Skyflyer strives for. Her team listened attentively, jotting down notes. "I want a company-wide recognition program rolled out immediately," Amara continued. "Employees like Tina deserve to be celebrated. Their efforts inspire others to rise to the same standard." Later that afternoon, Tina was called to a surprise meeting at headquarters. Nervous and unsure of what to expect, she entered the room to find Amara herself waiting. "Tina," Amara said, extending a hand. "I'm Amara Johnson, CEO of Skyflyer Airlines." Tina's eyes widened in shock. Oh my goodness. I didn't realize." Amara smiled warmly. "You had no reason to. But I was on your flight yesterday, and I saw how beautifully you handled that difficult passenger. You were professional, calm, and empathetic. That's the kind of excellence we need more of at Skyflyer." Tina's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. "Thank you, ma'am. I just try to treat passengers the way I'd want to be treated." "That's exactly the mindset we need to nurture," Amara replied. "Your actions inspired me. I'd like to recognize you publicly and invite you to be part of our next leadership training workshop. We need role models like you to lead others." Tina's eyes welled up with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Amara said, smiling. "Yes," Tina whispered, a proud smile spreading across her face. The ripple effect. Word of Tina's recognition spread quickly throughout the company. Employees, once skeptical of the changes, began to embrace them. They realized the overhaul wasn't just about criticism, it was about creating a culture of respect and celebrating those who embodied Skyflyer's mission. The ripple effect was undeniable. Flight attendants supported one another more openly, shared tips for dealing with difficult situations, and took pride in their work. Passengers noticed the difference, too. Positive feedback poured in, praising Skyflyer's renewed commitment to service. For Amara, the transformation was personal. She had learned that change didn't happen through policies alone. It happened through people, through their choices, actions, and willingness to grow. Skyflyer Airlines was no longer just a company, it was a community bound by purpose and pride. And Amara Johnson, the woman who had quietly boarded a flight as an ordinary passenger, knew they were finally soaring towards something extraordinary. A legacy reinvented. Months had passed since Amara boarded Flight 437 as a regular passenger, and the winds of change had swept through Skyflyer Airlines. From the bustling ground staff to the flight attendants in the skies, the transformation was visible. Employees walked with a sense of purpose. Smiles weren't forced, they were genuine. Passengers were no longer overlooked, they were valued. Amara watched it all unfold like a gardener witnessing the first blooms of a once dormant garden. But she knew this was only the beginning. Change was fragile, and like any strong leader, she refused to grow complacent. The annual staff summit. Skyflyer's annual staff summit was a much-anticipated event, attended by employees from every corner of the company. This year, however, the excitement was palpable. Whispers of who might be recognized for their contributions buzzed among the crowd, and many wondered if the CEO herself would make a rare public appearance. The grand conference hall was decorated with Skyflyer's signature blue and silver, symbolizing flight and excellence. Screens displayed videos showcasing the airline's transformation over the past year, happy passengers, empowered employees, and testimonials that painted a powerful story of redemption and growth. When Amara finally took the stage, the room fell silent. Her poised figure radiated confidence and warmth, and every eye was fixed on her. "Good morning, Skyflyer family," she began, her voice carrying across the room. "This year has been one of immense growth and introspection. We faced uncomfortable truths, but instead of hiding from them, we faced them head-on. And because of you, each and every one of you, Skyflyer Airlines is soaring once again." A ripple of applause swept through the hall. Amara paused, letting the energy settle, before continuing. "Change begins with people. With the choices we make when no one is watching. With the small kindnesses we extend to one another. Today, I want to celebrate the heroes among us, the employees who embody our values and remind us why we do what we do." The hall erupted in cheers as Amara began calling names. Ground staff who went above and beyond to assist struggling travelers. Maintenance teams whose diligence ensured safety without compromise. Flight attendants who handled challenges with grace. And then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. "I want to honor one person who has come to represent the very best of Skyflyer," Amara announced. "Her actions on a flight I boarded, unknowingly as a passenger, inspired me and set a new standard for us all." A video began to play on the screens, showing Tina calmly managing the agitated passenger from Flight 437. The audience watched in awe as the story unfolded, culminating in Amara's meeting with Tina at headquarters. When the lights came back on, Amara smiled. "Tina, please come forward." Tina's face turned crimson as her colleagues applauded her loudly. She stood, shaking slightly, and made her way to the stage. Amara extended her hand, pulling her into a warm embrace. "Tina," Amara said, handing her a crystal plaque engraved with the words Skyflyer Excellence Award. "You showed me, and all of us, what it means to lead with grace, kindness, and resilience. Your actions didn't just fix a moment, they sparked a movement. For that, we thank you." Tina blinked back tears, her voice shaky as she spoke into the microphone. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just tried to treat people the way I'd hope someone would treat my family. I never thought it would matter this much." "It always matters," Amara replied softly, her words resonating across the room. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for Tina. It was for the collective effort of every Skyflyer employee who had chosen to embrace the company's new vision. A transformation complete. In the months following the summit, Skyflyer Airlines became a case study in corporate transformation. Industry leaders marveled at how quickly Amara had turned things around, and other companies sought her advice on reshaping their cultures. Passenger satisfaction scores reached record highs, and glowing reviews flooded social media. Travelers praised the airline's attentive crew, seamless service, and a sense of dignity that set Skyflyer apart from its competitors. Journalists clamored for interviews with Amara, wanting to know her secret. In one such interview, she sat calmly in front of the camera, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "The secret?" Amara said, smiling faintly. "It's no secret at all. It's about going back to the basics, respect, empathy, and listening. When you build a culture of care, both employees and customers will reflect it." The interviewer leaned forward. "But you personally experienced the issues firsthand when you boarded Flight 437. Why did you decide to go undercover?" Amara's expression turned reflective. "Because leadership isn't about staying in an ivory tower. It's about stepping into the shoes of the people you serve. I needed to see for myself what was happening, so I could fix it." "And how did it feel?" the interviewer pressed. To be treated so poorly on your own airline? Amara paused, her eyes steady. It hurt. But it was necessary. That experience gave me clarity and fire. Sometimes you have to feel the cracks to fix the foundation. The interview became viral, hailed as a masterclass in leadership and humility. People admired Amara not only for her sharp business acumen but for her courage to confront uncomfortable truths. The ripple of legacy. Skyflyer Airlines didn't just recover, it thrived. The company's culture became its most valuable asset. Employees embraced the ethos of treating every passenger with care, regardless of their class, appearance, or status. Amara made it a habit to continue her undercover flights, not as a gimmick but as a core part of her leadership philosophy. Some flights went smoothly, while others revealed new areas for improvement. But Skyflyer had become agile, ready to respond to challenges with transparency and resilience. On one such flight, Amara found herself seated next to a young girl who clutched a stuffed animal nervously as she buckled her seatbelt. Amara smiled softly. "Your first flight?" The girl nodded shyly. "I'm scared." Amara leaned in closer. "Let me tell you a secret, flying is like dreaming. You're floating in the clouds, and soon you'll land somewhere beautiful." The girl smiled, relaxing slightly. A flight attendant appeared then, kneeling beside the child with a kind smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We're going to take good care of you." Amara sat back, her heart swelling with pride. This was the airline she had always envisioned, an airline where kindness and service reigned above all else. As the flight took off, Amara gazed out the window at the vast blue sky stretching endlessly before them. Skyflyer had weathered its storm, and in its place, a stronger, more purposeful airline had emerged. For Amara Johnson, this wasn't just about airplanes, profits, or prestige. It was about people, lifting them, respecting them, and carrying them toward their own horizons. Skyflyer Airlines was no longer just a business. It was a legacy. A promise that every journey, no matter how far, would begin and end with care. And for Amara, that was the greatest victory of all.